Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of Build Different with Kahua. We're kicking off this season with a conversation that every construction leader needs to hear. And just like last year, I'm going to just quickly hand this thing off. Sarah Pope, our Senior Director of Enablement, is sitting down today with Gretchen Gegel, and I am so excited to hear this talk about women driving change in construction technology. So, with that, I will turn it over to Sarah and Gretchen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Pope, and I am here with Dr. Gretchen Gegel. Gretchen, for those who may not know you, can you share a little bit about your journey in construction?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was being introduced as a speaker at the Construction User Roundtable a few weeks ago, and he kept saying, and she has 40 years, over 40 years in the industry. I said, Greg, could you please stop saying that? He said it like 4 times. But yes, I've been in the industry for a long time. I started out of engineering school running manufacturing plants as Ralston Purina's first female operations manager in the 80s. I joined FMI after my MBA in the 90s, and I've been a strategic advisor helping big clients, General Motors, Intel, Marriott, think strategically about how to deliver billions of dollars of construction in the most cost-effective way. So that was my primary career in construction.
That sounds amazing. Just from that list, what do you feel like is maybe a role that's really helped shape you the most?
Oh my gosh. Early in my career in manufacturing plants, I was put in charge of a failing company, 27 years old, managing 800 employees and given 12 months to turn it around. I learned a lot about, I didn't know it was psychological safety at the time, but I'd never run a baby food plant. I'd run a dog food plant and a cereal plant. And I didn't know how to fix things, but I knew I had 800 employees that did know how to fix things. And if I just walked the plant every day and listened to their ideas and built trust so that they would give me ideas over time, and we did turn that company around. Um, yeah, every position I've had as managing director, CEO, moving to Australia in 2018, starting a company from scratch in my 50s, knowing one person over here, and really having to reestablish myself as an expert in construction. And that's when I pivoted over to helping women. I mean, people say I've been supporting the success of women in construction for 40 years. Well, no, I was just a woman in construction. But when I moved here, and really in 2019, that's when I started running women's leadership programs after my PhD in leadership and writing the book and everything. So I've always tried to give back to the industry. And I think that's why my peers nominated me into the National Academy of Construction in 21, that I love the industry and all those experiences. I really tried to roll my sleeves up and help make it a better industry.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I've personally enjoyed following your work for such a long time. Big fan of everything that you have going on right now and excited for what's to come. You
Thank
touched on
you.
trust a little bit. I do want to talk about that more as we get into it a little bit. But right off the bat, it seems like you have led and advised on some really complex programs and
Mhm.
organizations. When you look at construction today, where do you see technology most directly changing how leaders actually lead?
Yeah. It's interesting because people sometimes have a tendency to compartmentalize technology. It's like LiDAR or the fun little thing or AI, or I really think of technology more holistically. Like it's giving people and leaders the right information at the right time to make decisions. And that's the difference between data is just data. We can flood people with data, and we're pretty good at that now, right? Actually, but information is actionable. It helps us. And when there's a very simple acronym that John Cotter created around leadership decades ago that I've used: set direction, align, and motivate. And it's the alignment part. And if you have good data, if your technology is giving you good information, whether that's the technical information of how big that window should be, or where we are on the schedule, or how we should, what changes we should make and what the impact's going to be on cost and schedule. It's aligning people around that and keeping people motivated.
I think that makes a lot of sense. We hear a lot about processes, behaviors, and trust, and kind of that
Mhm.
um, holy grail, if you will. When technology is introduced to a construction program, what do you think would break first there between the processes and behaviors or trust?
All of the above. And it's really interesting. I was born in Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, and it's the show me state, right? And I joke that construction is a giant show me state. Like, show me 50 different companies that have tried this and I might try it. And for as much risk as we take, it's interesting to me, but every project, people say, well, not on my project. You try that on your project. I've got to hit schedule. I've got to hit cost. I can't try this thing or that thing. And I think that really, I was just thinking about this morning, the great TED Talk by Simon Sinek, Start with Why. People understanding that technology is going to happen, why we need to adopt it. In fact, years ago, now that I think about it, I gave a speech, CII or someplace, and I put a picture of Indiana Jones when he had that giant boulder and he was running from it. And I was talking about artificial intelligence at the time. And I said, it's coming. You can't outrun it. And if you're not implementing it, your competitors are implementing it. So really thinking about one thing I learned during my PhD, I also studied agility. Chris Worley saying change is like a muscle, and you can build the capacity for teams and organizations to change. And I think the rapid, accelerated evolution of technology is really going to require us to help our teams be resilient and understand that this change is like a big boulder. Like, we can't outrun it, and we need to adopt the technology.
So you feel like some of the best leaders that you see are ones that are actually embracing that change, it sounds like.
Absolutely. It's this model that I developed years ago. And for being from Kansas, I use a lot of boat analogies. But when you think about we're going to implement XYZ technology or new process or a new behavior or anything like that, right? It's like a boat, and the leader saying, this is where the boat is going. And you have people that just jump in the boat, the early adopters. They say, yep, this is great. I've been waiting for this. And then you have people that have a foot in the boat and a foot on the dock. I'm not sure this is going to happen. And people standing on the dock and people standing on the beach. And you're trying to get people through quick win. That's a great way to adopt technology, is to get the quick wins and go, yeah, I can do this. People fear change. It's our amygdala in our brain. They fear they won't be able to do it. And then there are people standing on a mountain 50 miles away from that boat saying, I'm never getting in that boat. And you need to realize that once you've given them one or two opportunities, they need to go find another boat. They are never, my young egotistical leader self used to think I could get them off the mountain, and you can't. And they're very disruptive to the people that are getting on board with things.
Yeah, you're right about that. I like that. Kind of find your own boat. I want to tie two very important topics together, since this is for women in construction and you've hit so much on change and the importance of change management. Many women lead change actually without having any kind of formal authority or title or whatever it is. In your experience, what do you feel like really builds that credibility the fastest when you're trying to move forward with a program?
Yeah, I actually learned a lot about this writing my book, Building Women Leaders, because I interviewed 40 or 50 industry leaders, male and female. And I asked them, what women do you most admire in the industry? What skills do you think they have that have made them successful? And it came back loud and clear. You have to have the knowledge. Like, when I took over that baby food plant, I didn't know how to make baby food. I had to walk the floor and learn every aspect of how we made baby food, right? So we work hard to gain the knowledge. We build strong relationships, and that's foundational to anybody's success, really. And then the other thing I learned is that you have to back yourself, right? If you don't back yourself, nobody else is going to. So 70% of us are going to have imposter syndrome at some point in our lives. And I've learned a lot from my friend Allison Shamir, just wrote a book on imposter syndrome. And another friend, Michelle Sales, just wrote a book on confidence, the difference between the two. And we all have moments where we don't have confidence. But that little voice in your head may be lying to you about how good you are. And you need to not listen to it if it's lying to you. You need to back yourself and know that you know what you're talking about, and build those strong relationships and not be afraid to ask for help. That's actually how I end my book, that I think asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. It demonstrates humility. We don't all know everything. I'm 61 years old and I still have a coach. and I have a PhD in leadership. And, being able to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find it with confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for women who are a little earlier in their careers who want to, maybe follow your shoes and lead these large programs or drive this wonderful transformation, what skills or experiences do you feel like really matter the most right now at this day and time?
Yeah. Earlier in your career, first you have to decide that you love the industry. I love construction. I talk to my girlfriends that aren't in construction. They're like, Why construction?" And my answer is always, do you like charging your cell phone? Do you like driving on roads or flying out of airports or watching sports in stadiums? I mean, eating in beautiful restaurants, it all gets constructed. And really having pride in our industry. I'll go back to the relationships and finding mentors and sponsors. I've had incredible mentors and sponsors very early in my career, really great mentors and sponsors that helped me be successful. And the other thing is not to be afraid to take risks and raise your hand. So that baby food experience happened because I raised my hand. I was running a cereal plant in Davenport, and our plant manager was put in charge of operations for this new company. And I went into his office. I thought about it for a couple of days and I said, "Ron, I want to go with you." And he said, "I don't have a position for you." And I said, "I don't care. It's a failing company. There's a lot of things going on and I'm going to learn a lot." And really for the first 6 months, 4 months, all I did was find problems and fix them. Boy, did I learn a lot. And then was put in charge of manufacturing and then was put in charge of distribution. I'd never run a warehouse before. And so not being afraid to raise your hand and try things and know that failure is not the end of the world. We're going to try things, and some things we're going to like and some things we don't, and some things we're good at and some things we aren't. And yeah, it's not to catastrophize. I don't, is that the word? When something doesn't go perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. Change really almost always creates friction. I feel like no matter how big or small, or if it's a project or something personal life, whatever, change just comes with that natural friction. How do
Mhm.
you feel like leaders should respond to resistance when introducing a new way of working? Or what are some of those early warning signs that you were touched on a little bit that things are maybe about to derail?
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to your earlier comment about titles and leadership. Leadership is not about a title. I know lots of people with big fancy titles and nobody's following them, and lots of people with nobody direct reports. Leadership is about an ability to influence. And as Edgar Schein, the noted MIT professor and author, said, leadership is about influencing people. It's about finding things that can be done differently and convincing people to do that. That's what true leadership is. And when you're implementing change, you have to stay the course, back to the boat, right? The boat is going this direction. If you start waffling, people are going to doubt. Maybe we're not serious about this change. Maybe I shouldn't climb in that boat. And the fear, we have to, I mean, I'm a brain geek now. We're learning so much about neuroscience and the brain through fMRIs and the amygdala. Who knew we were all going to be talking about amygdalas 20 years ago, right? That thing in our brain, described like a walnut or a jalapeno in our ancient brain, that is the fight, flight, or fear, and it's about vulnerability. So I saw this great picture once about a trapeze. When you let go of one bar and you're reaching for the other one, there's this gap, and you don't really know how things are going to go, right? So fear is a natural protective emotion that our brains have. And I think the more that leaders can have empathy for that and think, well, they're just being stubborn, or they're just being whatever, but how we talk people through that and how we engage. And I use the disc profile, right? S's want to know the logic behind the change. They want to be involved in engineering the change. And the C's want to know what's the new correct way to do things. And the D's are over there going, just get on with it. Could we just please change? And so understanding that different people react to change in different ways, building those, what Edgar Schein calls level 2 relationships. I see you as a whole person. I validate that you're having these feelings, and I'll help you through it. So it takes a lot of time and empathy.
Yeah, I really like that angle. That's something that I think it's just kind of skimmed over a little bit in the big scheme of things. Projects or whatever it is tend to move really quickly. Change happens really fast. But sometimes you forget you have to recenter it because you're dealing with people really at the end of the day. And everyone has kind of those thoughts and feelings. So I love kind of your angle from the neuroscience behind addressing the human first. That's great. When you look out 5 to 10 years, what do you feel like leadership in construction will demand more of? Do you think it would be more of kind of that emotional intelligence, or is it something totally different?
Yeah, no, definitely. I've had an emotional intelligence coach for 10 years, Brent Darnell. He's great. He's been working on emotional intelligence in our industry for 25 years. Can you imagine that? He got hooked on it when he was working at Skanska. I want to talk about technology and the rate of change too. There's a great book by Eric Topol called The Patient Will See You Now, and it's about healthcare. But the premise applies to construction too, that technology is advancing so quickly that it's outstripping a human's capacity to change. I'll give you a concrete example. I'm implementing Salesforce in this new institute I've started, and I used to think I was a Salesforce power user, and I haven't been on it in 8 years, and it's totally different. It's like I got out of a Ford and climbed into a Ferrari, and I don't know how to operate it, right? And so we need to understand that technology processes are evolving at an accelerating rate that is going to require even more patience. I think there's a couple of other things going on. I mean, when I started FMI, I didn't have a laptop or a cell phone. I mean, think about that. I used to stand in line at a payphone in an airport and pray that I could get to the payphone before my flight took off. There was no Wi Fi on planes. We're bombarded with information constantly. We've got to figure out how to quiet the noise. And I think technologies like Kahua, right? How do we in on what the critical information is, not flooding people with every possible thing we could give them? I think that's over the next 5 to 10 years is a gift. One of the things I hear the most from people is, I can't keep up with my emails. I can't keep up with my Teams and my Slack and my Yammer and my WhatsApp and people are feeling overwhelmed and buried. And I think COVID laid a whole nother layer onto that with everybody being on Zooms and, the world is just a complex place. So I think leaders in these high pressure, time sensitive projects, the more that we can enlighten the big rocks, what's really important, what information is really important, what are the levers that are really going to help us succeed on these projects. I think that's what it's going to take from leaders.
Yeah, that's interesting. You touched on a couple of different things there, but how do you feel like leaders should balance the influx of data, human judgment, but also that really important experience component? How do you think that people should be balancing all three of those?
Yeah. I heard a great analogy about artificial intelligence the other day. And, people, the fear it's going to take over our jobs and this, and, how do we balance, as you said, technology, knowledge? You're not going to ask ChatGPT how to remove a brain tumor and then go remove a brain tumor, right? You have to have the expertise to know if artificial intelligence is telling you the correct information. You have to decide how we use that information. So the expertise is just as important. Technology can bring us to analyze data faster. I saw a presentation about a company that had their superintendents videotape their pre-job planning safety huddles, and AI analyzed 160,000 to look at what words and phrases created crew engagement, right? A human couldn't do that. But the so what is, so what do we do with that information? That's the leadership. That's the experience. That's somebody implementing Kahua's technology and saying, I've got to understand how this technology built into processes, built into behaviors is going to help us deliver this project on time, safely, under budget, et cetera. So I think those intersections are really critical.
Yeah, that's a great segue into my next question, which is a little more forward looking in nature. But what gives you optimism about the next generation of leaders in this industry?
Mm, gosh, lots of things. I I've been running a women's leadership program here in Australia, but I also run a first time leaders program. And I just closed one out in Brisbane last week with men and women who are early in their career. I love spending time with them. They're like SpongeBob, right? I coach CEOs too. Sometimes they think they have everything figured out, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But the next generation, I think, will continue to bring a humanness to how we do our work. Will we are such a stressful industry, as evidenced by our suicide rate, right? And some of the old ways of thinking, the person who opens the gate in the morning has to be the person that closes the gate on the project at night. We need to be rethinking those. John Holland Group, who's one of the largest contractors in Australia, is piloting 2 start times on their projects. So they'll have an early start time and then they'll have a 9 o'clock start time so that people can actually take their kids to school or drop their kids at daycare or and I think that new way of thinking about things, our industry is not broken, but we can do better. And I think we can treat our people with more humanity and try and bring that darn stress level down, you know? I've seen it. I've been on job sites with serious injuries, job sites with suicides. It's not fun. And so I think this next generation will hopefully help us continue to evolve as an industry that really cares for our people. We care so much. We have such great people. How do we take a little bit better care of them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love kind of what you mentioned there too about, changing some of the things so that either parent could do it, not just, the mother kind of doing the school drop off or school pickup, but either parent because we're changing together as a society. I think that's an important move and advancement for women in any workplace. I really want to get your thoughts on this last question that I have for you. It's a big one and I can't wait to see, what you're going to say here, but what is one misconception about women leading in construction that you would love to retire today?
Well, there's 2 different viewpoints on this. I think women have a misconception sometimes that we need to be as tough as the guys. And this was me when I joined FMI. I wore blue blazers. I smoked cigars when I played golf. I drank whiskey. I mean, I did everything the guys did. I was the second woman hired in 45 years at FMI. So I did everything to fit in. And now I understand that I think our industry is doing a better job of creating space for different types of people of both genders. Because if you look at the men, it's kind of been the louder, more dominant, more direct that have been successful. And we need to create space for different voices. So I think women trying to fit in, doubting themselves, just own yourself, just back yourself. That's a misconception. I don't know that it's misconceptions of men about women. I think it's more unconscious bias and realizing, like when I was writing my book, Building Women Leaders, a blueprint for women thriving in construction, I was writing there's only one chapter called Unconscious Bias in Dominant Culture. The rest is just a book on leadership, and I hope men read it too. But I climbed into a shared ride car at Reagan Airport, and my Uber driver said, busy week? And I said, yeah, Kansas City, Chicago, DC, New York. And he said, oh, are you a flight attendant? This was last year. And I'm in a suit, right? And I thought, well, gosh, maybe the suit makes me look like a flight attendant. Maybe I shouldn't wear the suit. But I asked him, I said, would you have asked a man? Would you have said that to a man? And he said, no, I probably wouldn't. And I probably would have asked him if he was a pilot. And so I think understanding when I was president of a company, 2 men hired me, must be woman owned. No, we're not. Why did they hire you as president? Because I'm actually the most qualified person to be president of this company. So I think it's not really a misconception, but it's a presence to seeing women being spoken over in meetings and things that happen, unconscious bias things, and being able to raise your hand and say, hey, could we go back to that idea that Gretchen just shared? I think it was important.
Yeah, I'm certainly with you on that one. I think probably everyone out there would be, but thank you so much, Gretchen. It has been absolutely wonderful chatting with you today. I think you're doing really amazing trailblazing things in this industry, and we cannot wait to see what else comes from you and all the great things that you're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah, and there is one more thing that we talked about me sharing is my new institute, the International
Yes.
Institute for Women in Construction, IIWIC.org. And people have said, oh my gosh, 40 years, Gretchen, haven't you put enough into this industry? But after 4 years of thinking about it, I finally decided that I would regret it more if I tried and And if I didn't try, then if I tried and failed. So the International Institute for Women in Construction is really not to replicate what NAWIC and other great organizations are doing. It's to amplify, it's to connect the dots globally about the conversations and how we shift the stories about women in construction. So I'm really excited about everybody that's gotten on board with us. We have a lot of significant leaders in the US on our board and our advisory board. And this is going to be my lasting legacy to the industry. So thank you for letting me share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for certainly being a trailblazer. We appreciate everything that you're doing in this space. And like I said, we are really excited to follow you along on this amazing journey.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Gretchen, for your time today. That was an incredible conversation. I took a lot away, and I know I'm going to be using some of these tips as I continue to learn and grow and change with my own daughter and to help her be more of an advocate for herself, both in school and in her career. Remember, if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or leave some feedback for us. That really helps us out. Also, be sure to subscribe so you get notified every time a new episode comes out. And finally, if you have any suggestions for future episodes, we're always excited to hear that. Have a wonderful day.